do you remember the first series that truly moved you to your core? Something that was the perfect meld of emotions with its art, music, and story, leaving a lasting imprint on your heart. For me, that was Your Lie in April. This series left me with a lasting emotional gut punch every time I thought about it. And the question of, do I have nostalgia glasses for this series, and is it as emotionally moving as I remember came to mind one day? So, I decided to take this emotional polar plunge and dive back into a world that, being honest, I've been reluctant to revisit ever since my first watch. Before booting up the series, I was doing my best to remember the emotional beats and how they affected me. But man, once I started watching, let's just say the emotional damage from the show was a dump truck more than what I remembered. And for those of you who don't know much about this series, it opens with a young middle school girl full of playful innocence chasing down a little black cat, to then cutting to a flashback of our main lead, Arima Kose, a pianist prodigy who plays beautiful pieces of music with soulless perfection. Within the first episode, the audience finds out that Kose has not played the piano in 2 years, with us wondering why. Well, the series then happily obliges to show us, while also delivering a hook to the ribs by showing that Kose, who's only 12 during this flashback, is having a mental breakdown on stage because he can no longer hear the notes for the piano when he plays. His childhood friend Tsubaki says that when you're in love, the world is so full of color. But for Kose, there is no color in the piano, no love in the works of music. His world is monotone. He only played the piano because his mother would force him to play for hours and hours on end, beating and yelling for each error until he ended up becoming a human metronome, devoid of all emotion and humanity in the score. But bearing with it, because in his young mind, being perfect for his sickly mother and winning the competitions was all she needed to be healed and endure her illness. After the flashback, he's then dragged out by Tsubaki to accompany her so that she isn't the third wheel on their friend Watare's date. And this is the start of his world becoming vibrant once again. Kose arrives at the date venue early, and as he's wandering around, he finds a pair of heels hung up on a branch. As he's thinking to himself, why would these be here? He then overhears a melody being played further into the park and is enticed to find the source. So as he is searching, he then discovers the middle school girl we saw in the opening, playing a melodica for some children, and Kose is just hypnotized by the music. After finding out her name is Kaori, she is the complete opposite of Kose. She is someone who paints color into the world and has an absolute love for music and wanting to share the same joy that music brings with others, with that passion matched only by her fiery personality. After some shenanigans and misunderstandings, Tsubaki and Watari arrive, with Tsubaki telling Kose, "Hey, Kaori likes Watari, so you're just friend A, got it?" And one thing that Tsubaki hid was that the date was to see Kaori's violin contest, prompting some anxiety for Kose upon entering, feeling the atmosphere and the stares from those who recognized him. But once the competition started, he was in his element, knowing the intricacies of the violin and piano duo, measuring the tempo, understanding the performer's emotions from their playing. After one of the later performances, Kaori then marches onto stage to take her place, praying to God that her music reaches the people in the audience. And she begins a performance of pure emotion, throwing all forms of restraint to the wind and letting the music flow through her, becoming fully encapsulated by the score, with the same raw emotion blanketing the audience and pulling everyone into her reality. But since it was an official competition, she didn't place. But she left Kose with a lasting impression, leaving him wanting to see her more and more, replaying the performance over again in his mind, and we see this gleam in his eye we haven't seen before. As Kose was thinking about the contest once again, he ran into Kaori, who's waiting for Watari. But being that Watari was at soccer practice, the two of them end up going to a cafe. And while there, they see some little girls playing a piano, with Kaori gently suggesting to Kose that he plays with them. Kose then starts to play the piano gently, matching the skill levels of the little ones, but then suddenly elevates the piece in showcasing his skills. And just as suddenly, he has this look of terror appear on his face and stops abruptly. After eating their meal, they find a little black cat, with Kose revealing that he had one very similar as a child named Chelsea who he rescued off the streets. In that same moment, Kaori appoints Kose to be her accompanist for the next contest. Kose of course refuses, but that doesn't stop Kaori from trying her best to convince him, honestly acting like a madman by posting the music sheets everywhere he went and playing it on loop over the school speakers. But the final nail in the coffin to convince Kosei was when the day of the competition arrived and Kaori, in an emotional plea, begs him to join her because all she wants is to be remembered for her music. Kosei agrees and the gang rush over to the venue. Upon arriving, you can see the embers of pressure Kosei had to perform the pieces perfectly, with him panicking while sight playing the music. Kaori shows up in front of him, asking how they should play the piece and if he likes her dress. But Kosei is so wrapped up in his own mind that he doesn't even notice her, resulting in her headbutting him to snap him out of it. And all she says is, "Watch me," and that to remember that music is freedom. A stark contrast to that which his mother engraved into his mind. The pair get into their position on stage and begin their performance, with all going smoothly. That is until Kosei slowly stops being able to hear the music once again, and we see what he feels, the notes disappearing off the page, and in the feeling of being at the bottom of the sea, where nothing can be heard except for the thumping of your heart and the banging of the keys. In the midst of his panic, Kosei starts to frantically speed up the tempo, with Kaori struggling to rein in the performance, ultimately leading Kosei to stop playing. The sound of the violin fully echoed through the auditorium, with the piano nowhere to be heard, and shortly after the violin follows suit, becoming mute with the deafening silence filling the room. Kaori just stares at Kosei for some time, then restarts the performance, waiting for Kosei to join in. This moment right here, this is where the emotional moments begin and start to solidify for the series. Kosei in his mind sees not being able to hear the music anymore as punishment, and this all stems from the day he heard his mother was going to be released from the hospital to see his performance, and him being overjoyed and letting his emotions bleed through the music to hopefully reach her and to show how happy he was and how much he loved his mother. But she demolishes all in a swift blow and pulls him back to the monotone world of perfectionism, shattering the world of color Kosei had just created, leading him to finally breaking and saying to his mother, "You should just die." Those were the last departing words Kosei ever said to his mother. And this just shows he was no longer being the puppet of his mother that would sit in silence and blindly obey every single one of her actions. With him remembering that time, he sat back and couldn't say a word when his mother disposed of Chelsea after she scratched his hand. This scene just left me in shock. I literally paused the show a few times because it was just overwhelming. But the scene then just builds on its emotional beats because Kosei finds a time from before his mother became sick and just remembers the joy she used to bring him and teaching him how to play the piano, being gentle with the keys. And this memory alone calms him down enough that he begins to play with Kaori once again. But Kosei becomes a man possessed by the music and starts to steal the show and limelight from Kaori. But she doesn't even hesitate nor think about backing down for even a second and accepts the challenge Kosei is presenting her. And the duo starts a battle with each other for the lead of the performance, one constantly trying to top the other, taking the piece of music to the stars and bringing the audience with them to see this glistening masterpiece of beauty, resulting in the room thundering with applaud at its end. Kosei sees the response of the crowd and the impact the music leaves with them, just as Kaori did for him, with her becoming the catalyst for his love of music once again, leading him to glance over, seeing Kaori, who's looking up into the heavens, suddenly crashing down to earth and fainting on stage. The gang checks on Kaori in the hospital and she is doing just fine, but she leaves Kosei with the phrase, "Do you think you can forget?" After this point, the series really starts to find its foothold, building upon the relationships we've seen and the growth of each person. You have Kosei unraveling all the pain caused by his mother, and in him doing his best to carry on the gift of inspiring others through his music, the one he received from Kaori, wanting to experience that feeling once again. And in so, we see him return to the competitive world of piano, and with us being introduced to some of his old rivals, and seeing their pursuit of the old Kosei, and their reasons to play the piano. Seeing the dynamics in their relationships shifting from them chasing the perfectionist Kosei to understanding the now passionate Kosei. There's Tsubaki, who has to come to terms with her feelings for Kosei. This all stems from her seeing the chemistry between him and Kaori during their performance, causing Tsubaki to start slowly slipping into a colorless world full of only jealousy and hatred for music for stealing Kosei away from her once again, leaving her to try her best to brush some sort of color into her life. There's Kiyori, with consistently pushing Kosei to keep playing the piano and wanting only to be remembered, fearing she will be like the sakura trees bloom, around only for a short time. But like the trees, she leaves a beautiful memory. The story brings you through pain caused by others, legacy, and the way it leaves for those who are chosen to carry it. So to answer if I had nostalgia glasses for the series, yes. Yes, I did. But in the same way as wearing glasses on a rainy night, being that all I could focus on was the big drops on my lenses, remembering only the ending, taking away all the attention from the way the rain makes everything glistening and vibrant, the wet smell of the air, feeling the drops on my skin, and in part, the pacing, art, foreshadowing, especially the music, in helping to allow the time to let emotional beats sink in and to build upon the last, was just the perfect storm to moving me to feeling every emotion. And being honest, this was the first piece of media ever to make me cry, because for some aspects, looking at younger Kosei was the same as a mirror. This series has emotions and to some extent pain that everyone can relate to. But it teaches you how to see the pain and how to let it move on, just as the springtime